Right, so welcome to the Boston Asian American Film Festival's filmmaker Q&A for the shorts block Beneath the Surface, films that challenge our first perceptions that things may not be always what they seem. And today's Q&A features three shorts from the special block, Atomic Café, The Stranger, and Dirty Business. I'm Denise Kaur, and I'm a member of the screening committee and an assistant professor of American Studies at UMass Boston. And I have the honor of moderating today's conversation along with my students. These students are all undergraduates at UMass Boston and taking a class called Asian American Cinema. Shout out to the Mellon Foundation for supporting this class. And I'm so happy that today we have joining us Tadashi Nakamura, director of Atomic Café, Chen Yang, director of The Stranger, and Yutao Chen, director of Dirty Business. So let's get straight to the questions. Valerie, do you want to kick us off?
Hello. So I have a question for the Atomic Cafe short. I really enjoyed it. It was great to see your film, and I really liked how on one hand it was about the cafe and its owners and its customers, and then on the other hand it was about the Japanese American history and also about J-Town and Los Angeles. Can you talk about these connections?
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Yeah, I think LA is such a diverse city, but at the same time, it's like a lot of big cities. It seems it is segregated, especially with the freeways and the neighborhoods. But at the same time, there are a lot of these stories of just these historical interactions, and so I think the film we wanted to establish that. So I guess a little bit background is that the Atomic Cafe, maybe about 5 years ago, started to get a lot of mainstream coverage on the LA Times and kind of things like that. But it was really focusing on the punk scene and the punk aspect. And so at the same time, Little Tokyo is being, heavily gentrified, like a lot of cities. And so not only was our community being gentrified, but it almost seemed like our stories and our history was being gentrified as well, because they, things like they didn't mention that the original owners were incarcerated during World War II. They didn't mention just a lot of the Japanese American background to that story. So that was one of the main reasons why we wanted to kind of tell the story from a Little Tokyo perspective, because at that time we were, the Japanese American aspect of that story was starting to be written out of it.
Mainak, do you have the next question?
Um, yes. Hi, my name is Mainak, and I'm a sophomore in the College of Liberal Arts. I have a question for you, Tao Chen. I really like that your film was able to show us something that we usually don't really think about, where our trash and recyclables go. Your film takes us to California, but only at the beginning because the film also has us moving across the Pacific to Vietnam. I wanted to ask why you chose to begin your film in California with the disturbing statistics on the amount of waste being produced in California.
I think it has something to do with, I guess, how the idea for the project came to be in. This is actually a student project as well. I produced this as my thesis project at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. And when we planned it out, we didn't necessarily like plan it out as like a piece about plastic recycling in Vietnam. It was a collaborative sort of multimedia project on unseen workforce in the state of California. And we settle upon a lot of different types of labor or different types of work that we don't really talk to, but are an integral part of California's economy. And I think recycling workers is part of the, I guess, labor that we identified. And we have a domestic story on that, focusing on, plastic recycling in California and the US. And we just got really curious because at the time, China was the country that initiated a ban on importing plastic waste. And we just thought it would be like an opportunity to tell an extension or an international extension of that story. And we identified Vietnam pretty early on because we knew that at least that community is, one of those communities that really, impacted by China's ban on plastic waste, because a lot of the plastic waste ended up going to China, or supposed to go to China, ended up going to communities like Minkai. So yeah, we just thought that it was a great opportunity to tell an extension of what we've been working on in domestically. But we wanted to obviously build a bridge between the two. So we decided to sort of open with California, or with some scenes shot domestically in the US. And then when we traveled to Vietnam, we wanted to make sure that the visuals can be sort of combined pretty organically.
Great. Nung, do you want to take the next question?
Hi. Hi, I'm Young Park. I'm a sophomore in UMass, and I have a question about The Stranger. Like, this film resonated with me as an international student studying at an American university, especially the feeling of loneliness and sadness and missing my family. Like, often we think about coming to America as something to strive for or to be successful, but sometimes it feels different. Is this what you want to address in this film?
Thank you for the question. This Stranger is my thesis film. And initially I had the idea, it was basically based on my fear that after graduate from college in America, I won't be able to find a job. Well, I would say I probably would have find a job, but then it probably won't be the one I want to work on. So that fear was the initial drive to write the story. And sadly, it became true, especially during the COVID. And in New York City, everything is really hard. And I was also want to tackle on, because we have a lot of Chinese international students here study in America, and we all had dreams. But especially when we're art students, life can be hard. So yeah, that's basically what I want to say. And I'm glad to see that the feeling got basically transmitted to the audience. So yeah.
Ali?
Hello. So my question is in regards to the Atomic Cafe. So I'm a musician and I'm a music major here at UMass Boston. And I love the music scene in there because I just started working in the rock scene myself with a band of mine. And it's really interesting to see how LA's punk scene became like rooted through J-Town. And I really think it's interesting that the spaces of music were not just in recording studios or concert halls, but they could also be in a cafe, like in the local great holes in the wall where people might least expect it and who are not like so-called initiated. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the music throughout, Mr. Nakamura.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the fun part of the film for sure, was the cultural aspect. And I think for me it was interesting because I'm kind of grew up and still is mainly definitely more in a hip hop lane, and so the punk scene, I've been familiar with it, but it was really my co-director Akira Boch, who really grew up much more in the punk scene. He was a drummer in his own kind of garage band. But I think, like to what you were saying, I think what the cool part about the story is that it's really the jukebox, right? And this is, of course, this is before YouTube. This is before any kind of streaming service. So really it was the only way to kind of break in, was music-wise, was either the radio or the club scene. And so they would, these bands would press their own 45s and then, play it in a jukebox. And, on one hand, it's like, all right, it's playing in a jukebox in this small cafe in Little Tokyo, like big deal. But it's the fact that all these heavy hitters, you had people, not only heavy hitters in the punk scene, but you also had record executives. You also had people like, Andy Warhol, just kind of these pop stars of the day in that cafe to hear that song. So I think distribution wise, it was a really big opportunity for kind of up and coming kind of indie bands to get their music heard for the first time. To I guess people who had connections to much larger resources.
Reginald? Is Reggie here? Maybe not. Carly, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi, I'm Carly, and I'm a biochemistry major, and my question is for Yutao. So, coming from a place of privilege, we often view recycling as this universally positive action, and we feel like we're benefiting the environment. But your film portrays all of the negative side effects of the recycling industry that we are not necessarily aware of. So, I just wanted to ask your thoughts on this ethical dichotomy, and was this the kind of message that you wanted to portray in your film?
Yeah, I think during the production process, or even before we even started filming, I think we did a lot of research, and one I guess goal that we wanted to achieve is that we want to make sure we respect, or want to make sure that we elaborate upon the complexity that's in recycling. Especially in this case, I feel like it is very easy to, one of the characters actually say this in the film, is very easy to go in with a perspective of living in California and describe this as really depressing type of business. Obviously it causes negative impact on environment, and obviously it's not good for the health of people who are engaging in this sort of business. But at the same time, we also mentioned in the film that they've been doing it for so long that the sort of economic impact or economic benefits that it brought to the community was the driving force behind it, that they're doing for so long. And now that the Vietnamese government is initiating a similar ban that the Chinese government is initiating earlier, it is really a blessing and a curse for them. And that's the sort of the message that we wanted to convey in the film, is that with this sort of ban, it causes great uncertainty to the community there. And it is very hard to say whether or not it's good or bad. I mean, guess it's good in the long run, it's better for the environment, it's better for people's health, but then what they're gonna do after this is very much in the realm of uncertainty. So yeah, I think that's the complexity, or the complication that we wanted to highlight in the film. And yeah.
Amanda?
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm an English major, and I also had a question for Yutao about dirty business, and it was just, how did you meet these people in Vietnam who were handling the plastics and the recycling, and how can those who bear the brunt of environmental harm be a part of the solution?
It was a really challenging experience reporting wise, because none of us had any experience doing international reporting at that point. I'm from China. I studied journalism in the US, but I never really done any reporting in China or Asia in general. So it was kind of a scary experience. We did a lot of research, but without having someone embedded in that community, doing some scouting or sourcing for us in advance, it was very difficult. Obviously, we were able to track down our expert source before we went to Vietnam, but all of the characters that you meet in the film who are from that community, all of them are, the people we visited during production. We only spent I'd say less than 2 weeks, I would say 12 days in total in Vietnam. and we're not shooting on every day. So we just try to do our best, going to the community as often as possible, and try to meet as many people as possible. And that's one interesting aspect of that community, is that the whole entire area is so delved into plastic recycling that they have different sections or different areas of that same community engaging in different, I guess, processes that are involved. So it was really interesting to visit just the entire community and be able to meet people who are doing different type of work. And it was definitely very exhausting experience. We had to sort of knock on doors 9 to 5 every day. And people sometimes don't really want to talk to us, or not really comfortable being on camera. But I guess the positive side is obviously, like I mentioned earlier, one of our goals is actually producing a multimedia project. So if someone isn't really that comfortable with being on camera, we just interview that person and get some quotes that we could use for the print piece that we're working on, or even a portrait. We also did a portrait series with our multimedia project. And what's your second question? Sorry.
It was, how can those who bear the brunt of environmental harm be a part of the solution?
That is a tough one. We screen our film in multiple areas or countries, hoping that we could bring at least some sort of awareness to the issue. But it is very hard. I think for, going back to California, I think California is doing relatively well in terms of plastic recycling. A lot of the other states in America, the residents, they're not so aware of plastic recycling as a globalized sort of issue. And I would imagine, with everybody in quarantine right now, it certainly doesn't help with the amount of plastic waste that we generate. Yeah, so it is tough. I don't have an answer for you, but what I'm hoping is, with the project, going to different festivals, that we can bring at least some sort of awareness to the issue.
Jack?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jack Payton. I'm a junior American Studies major at the university. And I had a question for Chen Yang. So we were thinking about The Stranger in relationship to what was happening this summer in terms of Trump's proposed ban on international students. And I wanted to know, is your film more politicalized by this movement? Also, I loved the film, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. The answer is no, because the film was completed before the ban. So I was really just trying to convey the feeling of living in a foreign country alone and study and be uncertain about our future, basically. So that's what I want to say. It's not political at all. I try to keep all my work away from politics, because I feel like it's a complicated area that I'm not ready to touch yet. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
Kira?
Hi, my name is Kira. I'm Filipino American, and my question is for Tad Nakamura. In your film, Atomic Cafe is described as a place in J-Town where you feel like you belonged. In the case of the Atomic Cafe, would you say it was easier for white people to claim that space than the owners / minorities that created it?
I'm not sure. I can't really speak for the white folks in the scene. I think for Atomic Nancy, I think for them, because I think there's a general Asian American stereotype, right? And then there's a punk stereotype, and those two stereotypes definitely don't really intertwine. And so I think for a lot of Asian Americans, especially back then, and this has to go with the history of Japanese Americans, right? It's during World War II, we were incarcerated in concentration camps. And then afterwards, there was a lot of pressure to assimilate as much as possible, right? And that's to, do well in school, go to college, be a doctor or lawyer, kind of live this middle-class life, move to the suburbs. And the punk scene was like a big middle finger to all of that. And so if you identified with that, it was very much against the kind of Japanese American culture, mainstream culture that your parents were pushing. So I think, the Atomic Cafe was a space for you could be who you want to be, mainly, as a Japanese American, as someone else. Because I feel like, I can't speak for anyone else, but at that time, if you were white, you had the privilege of being accepted, not only in mainstream music culture, but especially in the punk scene. And so even today, right, there's a huge Latinx punk scene in LA. But I think when most people think of, LA punk scene, they don't necessarily think of that scene specifically. So, I think it was not only for the people in the punk scenes, but it was quote unquote the people that the community might be embarrassed about, right? Or the community might not want to admit that existed. It's kind of that, it's the child you don't talk about, at Thanksgiving when people are talking about, who's going to what college and who's doing what. Because there was lots of drugs, there was lots of alcohol, and it was just also like a general counterculture that I think that in that sense it kind of you had the freedom to be who you wanted to be and accepted within the community or within at least a space. And you could walk in dressed how you wanted to and people didn't look at you weird.
All right, Alcera.
Hello, my name is Asavari Francois. I'm a junior, also transitioning into nursing. I had a question for everyone. And so we know with current events that is happening, there have been a lot of adjustments, and we'd be remiss to not ask you about the pandemic and how that's impacting being a filmmaker. Can any of you share your thoughts with us?
I can go. So my husband and I were both filmmakers, so it's been a tough time for us because we can't. Well, it's really easy because we cannot go on set and shoot without being very cautious or taking tests beforehand, and there are a lot of preparation going on. And but I think things are getting better now because the productions, they are like restarting. And especially I live in Brooklyn, and my school is located in Steiner Studios. So a lot of productions are going on right now there, and they're doing the COVID test before they let everybody in. So that's a good thing. And my husband is on a shoot right now in New Jersey, and they're also doing the same thing. So I think as filmmakers, we just have to adapt to the new norm, and we'll get through it. I'm pretty confident about that.
I guess it's a bit of a tough question for me because I always considered, graduating from journalism school and producing a short documentary as, my thesis project. It's more of, I guess, that gray area between filmmaking and journalism. For me, I feel like filmmaking is definitely something I feel really passionate about. I think, visual storytelling in itself is, for me, is when I'm working on a project, I do feel that, a part of that endeavor is feeding off of or just offering me some, creative inspiration, just that process itself. But for me, I probably see myself kind of sticking with journalism for now. You know, working at, you know, print publications or online publications, because yeah, I mean, at the moment, filmmaking as an endeavor, I feel like it is pretty depressing. Things are pretty depressing. I've been to some online workshops and talking to other documentarians and other filmmakers, and yeah, things are not very very good at the moment. But for me, I think I was a little bit not disappointed, but I was a little bit underwhelmed at journalism school in terms of how much they teach you about the technical side of filmmaking. So for me, you know, maybe going to film school is, you know, definitely an option that I consider. But yeah, at the moment, it's very hard to jump on another documentary project, you know, with all the things that are going on. But still, I would say it is something that I feel very passionate about and probably will go into professionally in the future.
Yeah, I definitely would echo what everyone said, but I think it's definitely has impacted, just like everyone else. You know, really impacted. You know, especially, well, for sure the commercial filmmaking world, but especially the independent filmmaking world. And I do think it really depends on an individual basis. I think in general, this pandemic, you know, everyone is in such different situations. But like for me, I was currently or am currently working on a documentary on my father. But you know, now especially with you know, I have a young kid and another kid, preschooler, who's usually at preschool all day, and now he's with me all day. And so in terms of getting work done, there's zero amount hours of work being done during the day. And I think what's also scary too, especially, is the distribution aspect. You know, I think all of us, we you know, we spend, you know, 2 to 5 years making these films, and you know, the payoff, at least for me, is, you know, we really don't make any money. At least the films that I make, you don't really make any money. And so the kind of payoff is to be able to tour the film, you know, go to film festivals, travel, go to different colleges, and screen your film and interact with the audience. And you know, it doesn't look like, I think right now production is starting to slowly open up, but you know, I don't think anyone's thinking about going to a theater anytime soon, let alone a film festival. So I think on the distribution side, it is pretty depressing in terms of, you really just don't know what that's going to look like, in terms of, you know, screenings in theaters with a real live audience.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like such an extraordinary dilemma for the industry. Absolutely. I'm just actually monitoring the chat a little bit, and we actually have a follow-up question from Alcera for Chen.
Yes. Hello again. So in the film, we see Anna and her call with her mother early because she does not want her mother to see her cry. And me being an immigrant as well, do you feel that international students and immigrants have this pressure to succeed, that they hide their struggles from their loved ones? And how does that affect them?
Absolutely, 100%. Because for me personally, I first of all, I don't want everybody who study abroad, they don't want their parents at home to worry about them. So they hide their feelings. They only tell them the good things happening in their lives. And another pressure is the financial pressure. So because when we have the F1 visa status, we cannot work legally in America. So all the financial support is coming from our parents at home. So it's understandable that they put pressure on us. They hope we can succeed, of course. But well, I guess it depends on different people as well, because people cope with stress in different ways. But in my experience, all my Chinese friends here, they take this pressure pretty seriously. I think one of it's also a culture aspect. because it's as a Chinese community, it's just I think it's embedded in our personality that we need to make it work. We need to succeed. But personally, I really don't feel that this is a healthy way to lead your life, because you're living your own life. You're not living for your parents or anybody else. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. So we have our final question from Zach.
Hello, my name is Zach. I am a junior also, and I also am a psychology major. We just have one final question. So knowing what's going on in the world with all the uncertainty that's been happening, what advice do you have for us students, especially with the workspace?
I mean, I think, you know, on one hand, this is a really, right, this is unprecedented times. You know, who knows what's going to happen at the end of November. And I think on one hand, it's super scary, especially to be a young person at school. But at the same time, there's so much potential for real change right now. And I do think that right now, you know, there are, you know, the social movements, the BLM movement is really, really strong. And I think your generation is establishing a very strong voice, and right now has the ear. It's being forced to being listened to by older generations and corporations and powers that be. So I do think, you know, on one hand, in that sense, it can be a potentially very exciting time. You know, I was in college, I was an undergrad during 9/11, during the war in Iraq. And at the same time, you know, and this is like so much worse, right? But it really is an opportunity to make the change that we all need. I think, you know, my generation in a way kind of failed, and we're really looking up to, you know, your generation to really, you know, really push the agenda, really create the changes that we failed to make. But more importantly, you know, really use this time to really voice your opinions and utilize the skills that you're having now. Because honestly, like, I never thought of it, I'd be this way, but you know, as an undergrad, you have a lot. You might not seem like you have a lot of time, but you have the most time now than you probably will ever in your life. And you are for sure around the people your age that you'll never be around the same amount of people your age ever again in your life. So, you know, I really take advantage of this time to go out in the streets, to go out and organize, to go out and talk about these issues, because, you know, if whether you know it or not, older generations are finally realizing that your generation has very important things to say, and right now those perspectives might be exploited, but at the same time, I think you need to be aware of that. But at the same time, you know, at least the stage, you know, the light and your microphone are on to the rest of the world. So I'd really, you know, encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
For me, I think one of the, I wouldn't say positive, but I feel like for me personally, one of the positive changes that this whole pandemic situation, I guess, brought to me personally is that I feel like I have more time, or maybe I'm just forced to reflect upon myself and my journey up to this point. And you know, when you go out and you go online and watch, you know, documentaries or films that are published on, you know, big publications like the New York Times and the New Yorker, you know, a sort of a general trend that I noticed is that they, you know, ever since the pandemic started, they started focusing more on personal projects. You know, a lot of times when I watch some of the films that they produce, that they put out there, it's very much newsy. It's very much about a specific issue that's impacting a specific community in the world. But what I noticed is that there's been a lot more projects just focusing on really personal experience and personal journeys. I think that is something that carries value. If it has some properties that are universal or emotions that are universal, I think it carries a lot of weight, you know, especially in a time like these. So I would say reflect upon your own journey and, you know, find your own voices. I think that is something that is especially valuable. Like I said, right now, where people are not able to go out and explore and tell other people's story because of COVID. But what it does is that it gives you a little bit of room to, I guess, you know, analyze, you know, your journey and, you know, really come up with something that is personal. And, you know, before the pandemic, maybe you'll say that this is very personal, I don't feel comfortable sharing, or, you know, you don't know if other people can relate to that. But I feel like right now, you know, we have a lot of projects out there that prove that sort of notion wrong, I think. If it carries, you know, that sort of universal emotions and universal, I guess, characters, it is something that is worth sharing. So I would say find your own voice and, you know, tell your own story, and, you know, find things that you're generally passionate about. And for me, I'm just really passionate about storytelling and not necessarily, I guess, storytelling in a cinematic sense at this point. So, you know, with each story or project I take on, I'm so really delved into that process itself that I feel like what I'm doing with each project, with each story is sort of, you know, identify the story I wanted to tell and be very specific about the way I wanted to tell it, and then sort of ask myself, you know, what are some of the skills and experiences involved that I need to execute this idea. And if I don't have that particular skill, I would just, you know, figure out a way to learn that. I feel like, you know, after, you know, sort of repetition of this sort of cycle, I'm kind of improving myself as a storyteller and learning more skills. And I would say like having, you know, multiple skills is very valuable, especially in a time like this. So yeah, I would say those are my two advice.
These are very good advices. I think I agree. And for me, I think I envy you so much for as undergrad students, because you have all the time in the world. You just don't know it, probably. I think this is a very good chance for you guys to learn how to adapt to change, because that's a very important skill for you to obtain in your life. And also just utilize this time at home to really improve yourself. Read, cook, do whatever you like. And as filmmakers, all we can do is to write stories, ideas, because that's where everything starts, and that doesn't cost anything but time. And all we have now is time. So I really encourage you to use that and to write and practice your skills. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. And thank you so much for, I mean, what great advice. I'm actually taking in all of this advice as well. So thank you so much. So that's all we have time for now. So thank you so much to our guests, Tadashi Nakamura, Chen Yang, and Yutao Chen, for such a wonderful conversation. Don't forget to cast your audience vote for the Audience Choice Award by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen. Hashtag BAAFF 2020 to spread the word on all of our great films. Thank you so much for joining us.